Governor Pritzker, thank you so much for your time today in a very difficult moment for this country. First of all, I want to jump right into it. As we're speaking this morning in Minnesota, there's new video out of a protester getting part of their hand shot off by ICE. This comes after the killing of Alex Pretti over the weekend, with the federal government now openly lying about that shooting as well.
Right.
My question for you is, do you think we're at a tipping point where ICE either pulls back or this escalates into something even more dangerous between the federal government and the states?
Well, this has been building up for some time now. So anybody that thinks that, well, a couple of bad things have happened in Minnesota and that it's precipitated immediately. No, this has been going on well, since they were here in Chicago, I can tell you that. They still are here, but they were here in much greater force earlier. We had somebody who was shot 5 times, Miramar Martinez, for just driving her car. I mean, honestly, she was doing nothing at all, just like Renee Good. And in this case, they shot her 5 times. They put out false statements. Tricia McLaughlin with DHS consistently lies. And this was kind of early on when we didn't really know who she was. And she just said, well, they shot her because she owns a gun, and she was pointing it at the officers. Turns out none of that was true. They charged her, and all the charges were dropped. Meanwhile, she had to go to the hospital. She obviously recovered from 5 shots. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez was killed here in Chicago by an ICE officer who they had claimed suffered serious injuries, but he himself said that no, his injuries were not serious. But they killed this man who had just dropped his children off at childcare. So I'm giving you those examples because here we are now in Minneapolis, and it's happening over and over and over again. And it's because these ICE and CBP officers, under the direction of Kristi Noem and Tom Homan and Stephen Miller and the President of the United States, clearly are hell-bent on violating people's constitutional rights. They've done it over and over again. They're killing people now. They're hurting people. And they violated their First, Fourth, Fifth, and 10th Amendment rights. And we could go through all of those. But just to be clear, it is an attack on the American people and on people's rights, what they are doing. And this has now become, with the potential for funding of ICE in this current budget, which Democrats are now going to stand up to and against, but with the potential of increasing this by 7-fold. So we are at a dangerous moment in this country. President Trump and ICE and CBP need to pull back and reevaluate their strategy. And frankly, Kristi Noem ought to resign.
So you've said, to take this further, you've said previously that you believe the president's strategy is to sow chaos, to create the pretext so that he can invoke the Insurrection Act. I'm curious, what do you think, or what do you fear could trigger that decision? And can you just educate us as a governor, if that is triggered, what power do you have to protect your residents then?
The Insurrection Act is a federal law and federal act that, if he is allowed to invoke it, the state governments do not have the ability to stop him from bringing military onto our streets and into our states. So just to be clear, that unless they're truly, I mean, he could trigger an insurrection as a result of his calling in the military. So I mean, he is the one who is escalating these things and doing it without any provocation. The Insurrection Act is about literally putting down rebellions, not quelling protest. And so he's doing it because, look, why do you think that they're throwing tear gas canisters when there's no need for it? Smoke grenades, firing pepper pellets and rubber bullets. Why are they doing that? They are provoking people. And we're doing our best as states and as cities to try to stand between the protesters and ICE and CBP to make sure that it doesn't escalate into some like true mayhem that allows him to call out the military. We've pushed back on the National Guard being called in, and we've won so far. But I have to say, the Supreme Court of the United States is really, in the end, the only thing that could stand between what is occurring today and what could be truly mayhem across the country.
Let's talk for a minute about your victory. You won a significant victory in the Supreme Court. As you say, they ruled that the federal government can't take control of the National Guard from the governors. And that applies not just to Illinois, I think to all states now. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But in practical terms, how does that decision change the playing field in general, both for you as a governor and also for a White House that's still looking for ways to assert control? And would you like to see the National Guard deployed to protect or keep the peace in some way by governors now?
Yeah, let's remember that the National Guard's purpose is not to be at the beck and call of the President of the United States for the purposes of being sent into states against the interests of the people who live in those states. That's not what the National Guard is about. And so we won in the end because we reestablished at the Supreme Court that the National Guard is really supposed to be for the purpose of preserving the lives and health and safety of the people of our states, not working against the people of our states. So let's just put that aside for a moment, because I want to make sure you and everybody listening knows that even though we have beaten them back on the issue of federalizing the National Guard, when they're calling in thousands of ICE and CBP agents into our states, and that those agents are wearing uniforms, camouflage uniforms, I might add, wearing masks, not carrying or showing ID, driving around in unmarked cars. And when they are invading the peace of our neighborhoods and communities, and carrying, I might say, automatic weapons, and grabbing people off the streets and throwing them into the back of cars and driving them away to you don't know where for quite some time. This is just as bad as if they had called in the military. And when you multiply the amount of money that's being given to those two law enforcement agencies by 7, which is what the current budget would do if it went through, you are building this private police force for the president to carry out this unconstitutional effort against the people. So this is dangerous, but it is what is happening right now. And what is it that we can do? The supremacy clause of the United States Constitution makes it very difficult for us to push back. We can go to court, to federal court, and we've done it, and we're winning. We can teach people what their rights are, although I must say they are writing memos that are simply trying to abrogate and take away people's rights. That the idea that they can invade your home because they've now written a memo that basically says the Fourth Amendment is meaningless. I mean, you may as well just give up on the Constitution. So the idea that we're going to keep the presence of military off of our streets when they're just militarizing ICE and CBP, it is for naught that we are standing up and pushing back, unless we defund ICE, unless we make sure that we're taking them to court, holding them responsible, and importantly, and you've been doing a lot of this, catching and showing videos of the violation of people's rights. That is what is getting to people finally. I told people that when they were here in Chicago: pull out your cell phones, video everything and post it. And then we have created an accountability commission. So you can submit your evidence and testimony so that when we can hold them accountable, and some of it is being done in court, holding them accountable, but when this administration ends, and it will end, that we will be able to hold these people accountable, because we'll hold them accountable criminally, we'll hold them accountable civilly. Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, Greg Bovino, there's nowhere to hide.
Mm-hmm. There's also some power in recording right now for I guess I should ask this as a question. Does the president have to justify the Insurrection Act? And so if there's video that shows a state of not rebellion beforehand, that gives lawyers some power to push back if the president tries to do this?
Yes. Video evidence, as we've seen, is almost better than any other kind of eyewitness testimony. Video evidence, because then you can see it with your own eyes.
Yeah.
And indeed, that, in fact, is how we've won in court so often now, is that the video evidence just makes it plain as day. Tricia McLaughlin, Kristi Noem, they go, and Greg Bovino, they go hold press conferences and they say things and put out statements that are absolutely false. But you don't know that unless you have proof that it's false.
Yeah.
Early on in Chicago, when they put out false statements, we didn't know for sure. We thought it wasn't the case because we had heard from people on the ground that that wasn't the case. But it wasn't until we were able to gather that information and put it out that we were able to prove them wrong. Over and over and over again, they've been lying. So now we know when they put out a statement, an hour or two after something happens, claiming, oh, this person's a domestic terrorist, claiming that this person was pointing their gun at officers. And then the video shows that's absolutely false. The public begins to understand, and the judiciary begins to understand, that they can't trust what the administration says. And they are being held accountable in those court cases.
You've said a few times in our conversation that there's this big vote coming up where Congress gets to decide whether ICE's budget will be increased. Until Alex Pretti's killing, national Democrats in the Senate were poised to approve that increase. Is there anything you think national Democrats should be doing to fight harder against ICE's assault on states like yours right now?
This finally is what Democrats need to be doing. And they should have been doing this, by the way, a year ago. There were opportunities to do this, to push back, to stand together, to keep the Senate from voting in favor of these budgets that are hurting people. And in particular now, funding this kind of militarization of our cities. I believe that you're seeing the United States Senate, the Democrats in the United States Senate finally pulling together and acting as one, which is what they should have done early. But I can't explain some of the senators, to be honest with you. But here we are. I'm disappointed it's taken a year, but here we are. And Democrats are, in fact, moving in the same direction. You're seeing governors step up. I believe that we ought to have a governor's summit, maybe in Minneapolis, very soon, to talk about states' rights and how we as states can push back collectively against the federal government. I've been doing it in Illinois, but not every state is.
Let me ask you about both of those things separately, briefly. What would you like to see Democrats do? Well, let me phrase it this way. There's a chance that the government will shut down if Democrats refuse to fund ICE. Is it worth risk? Is a shutdown worth it?
The Republicans are the ones that have voiced this choice that you're describing. It doesn't have to be that way. You can have a separate vote on ICE and CBP funding. You can have a separate vote on that and vote on transportation funding and defense funding and all the other things separately. But the Republicans, because they've married all these things together, they're saying, well, if you stand against ICE funding, then you're against all the other funding. I do not believe we have to be against transportation department funding while we're against ICE funding. Those are two separate issues. The Republicans can separate these out. They're in control of the Senate. This is up to them. We're, as Democrats, we don't have to vote for this. We can stand and say, we're for funding all these other things and not this. It'll be their choice. The Republicans will be making the choice to shut down government if that's what happens.
Okay. You've said that you alluded to this idea of governors getting together. Can you give us a sense what more Democratic governors could do if they wanted to band together? And I'll just, for the audience, I remember during COVID, multiple governors in blue states made a compact, and I've heard talk of establishing similar laws in different states to capture video about ICE. Or what are some of the options you'd like to see Democrats do to build power together as governors?
Well, I'll share that, we created a kind of a playbook because we were at this before Minnesota was and before many others. And that playbook has included things like, our Illinois State Police has cameras that are capturing information. encouraging the public to do it, making sure that your know your rights information is common to everybody, whether they're undocumented people or U.S. citizens. And then very importantly, this idea of an accountability commission. Just because we created one in Illinois doesn't mean you can't have one in every state or have a national accountability commission, which I think we should start talking about doing. So these are things that I think governors can be sharing ideas about. We've gotten ideas from other governors, just like I believe many governors have gotten their ideas now from us. We passed laws that make it illegal to arrest somebody in a sensitive location, like at a state court, for example, or a county courthouse. We want people, whether they're undocumented or not, to show up and act as witnesses when there's a violent crime that's taken place. But you're not going to do that if you're afraid to show up because you're going to get arrested by ICE. Again, U.S. citizens too. So it's very disturbing. These are all things that I think we can share with one another, and laws that we could pass across the many states that are controlled by Democrats.
Governor, it appears that the DOJ has written the state of Minnesota, making a list of demands, things that it needs to de-escalate ICE. Among them, they want access to Minnesota's voter rolls. Do you think that a lot of this is about undermining the midterms? And as a governor, what would you do if he sent that to you?
I believe almost all of it is about undermining the midterm elections. I've been saying this for a long time. Look at the connection. She wrote it, Pam Bondi wrote it in one letter. But if you looked at all the individual pieces of what they're going after, it really is about the elections. So militarizing our American cities. I mean, people said, oh, no, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, Pritzker. You're talking about they're militarizing our American cities for the purposes of disrupting elections. Take this as evidence. One, the DOJ, for the first time ever, has demanded all 50 states, not Minnesota, all 50 states turn over their voter rolls to the DOJ because they're looking for fraud. We've been looking for fraud. Guess what? It turns out there hasn't been much fraud at all in our elections. And we know that because at a federal level over the last 5 or 6 years, people have gone over the voter rolls at the federal level and state level. And it turns out very few instances of voter fraud where somebody showed up and shouldn't have voted but got to. So that's one thing that they're going after the 50 states voter rolls. We've rejected that request. We haven't turned it in, and most Democratic states have not turned in that voter data. That's number one. Number two, remember Michael Flynn. Remember Michael Flynn, General Flynn, from back in 2020, early 2021, during the Stop the Steal, movement, and the January 6th attack on the Capitol, told the president he should seize the voting, ballot boxes. He should seize the ballot boxes, and that he should be counting the votes. So they didn't do it. But I guarantee you, because the president has hinted at this, that this effort to look at all of our voter rolls is an effort to say elections are fraudulent and therefore we're going to seize the ballot boxes. So and where are they doing this and focused most? It's in Democratic states. So the attack on our cities with military, the attempt to find fraud where there isn't any, to grab ballot boxes so that they can count the votes. This is all about disrupting the 2026 elections. Why? Because they know they're going to lose. They know they're going to lose. The president is acting in such a crazy fashion that even Republicans are giving up on supporting Donald Trump. So I really believe that this is happening right now. We all need to be speaking up and speaking out about it. It is an attack on Minnesota today, but it's really an attack on all 50 states with all the requests that have been made.
I keep saying it sounds like a conspiracy, but it's just what's happening. And I'm not the crazy person for reporting it. I feel you on that. I know.
By the way, just because they call it a conspiracy theory doesn't mean it isn't actually a conspiracy.
That's true. Yeah, that is what we're facing right now. It's such a weird, contorted time we're living in. It's like we're in the upside down. I want to respect your time. I have one more important question, which is the federal government has one detention facility in Illinois that I know of called Broadview.
That's
Is
right.
the state able to gain access to inspect conditions there? Do we know anything about how people are being treated and held inside that facility?
Well, once again, they were taken to court over this, and finally, people were given access to it. So we do now, but of course, they weren't given access until they had cleared out most of
Okay.
Broadview. But it
Oh,
had been full of people that they were detaining before we were allowed access. So we know a lot about from witness testimony what was going on inside the Broadview facility, which, by the way, is right outside the city of Chicago. It's a very small city, Broadview. They have a very small police department. It's been very challenging for them because the protesters have shown up there, hundreds of protesters, sometimes thousands, and there's a police force of 31 people
oh,
in Broadview. So we've had to support them with county sheriffs and with state police just to maintain order in the area. But the fact is that the Broadview facility was an abusive uh, endeavor, abusing power, of course, and there had been eyewitness testimony about that facility, that there weren't any beds, that there wasn't enough food for people to eat, that there weren't enough toilets for people to use. Why? Because they took this small facility and they jammed hundreds of people in on a daily basis. It's not supposed to be used for that purpose, but this is what's happening under Donald Trump. They literally are detaining people they shouldn't be detaining, trying to meet some quota that Stephen Miller has set for arresting people of color. That's what's really happening. They're going after anybody that looks brown or black, and they're grabbing them and either throwing them into a car or demanding they prove their U.S. citizenship. So I'm very worried about where we are. You asked at the beginning of this conversation, uh, are we at the precipice of something? Are we on the edge of something? Yes, I believe we are, and this is why I hope the federal government will take a step back, because they've been proven to have lied here. And in the immediate moment, didn't take days. It was all proven within the day. And so we know that they're abusing power, and we need to stand up, speak out, and push back on the federal government.
I just want to follow up on that really quickly and then we can go. Is when you say we're on the precipice of something, do you literally mean the Insurrection Act, or what do you think this could turn into next?
I think you've seen mass protests that are peaceful. I also think that you haven't seen the ICE and CBP opening fire on large crowds of people. They've one by one, we've seen people's rights violated and actual killings. But I think that this could explode at any minute because the president of the United States wants it to. And so the more he presses his officers to go do this, and to not step back and to not investigate and not hold people accountable who are breaking the law and violating the Constitution, the more likely it is that you're going to see, people, uh, you know, uh, taking matters into their own hands. And I would just say, I believe in peaceful protest. We all ought to be encouraging people to be loud for America. This is the moment. We are about to lose our rights. That is what we're on the precipice of, truly losing our rights as U.S. citizens, as people who are legal in this country. And this has been the aim of Donald Trump from the very beginning, and it's now coming to a head.
Governor, thank you for your clarity and for being willing to name what we're living through when so many other people aren't. I wish we could be describing something very different right now.
I do too. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, sir.